Hello, viewers. Welcome back to another engaging episode of Manager's Mantra, where we connect with industry leaders who are shaping the future of business management. Today, we have with us Harsha Vardhana, the founder and group CEO of Atom Financial Services. Harsha leads a borderless full spectrum financial services group integrating wealth management, investment banking, asset management, insurance broking, and legacy planning. He brings over 25 years of institutional expertise, having held senior leadership roles at Citibank, HSBC, and ICICI Group before founding Atom. Without waiting further, let's jump right into this insightful discussion. Hi, Harsha. Very good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining in today's Manager's Mantra session. It is lovely to have you with us today, and I'm sure it will be a great learning for all the viewers watching this, and it will be a very good session for all of us.
Likewise, Abhishek, it's such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for inviting me on this session. Really appreciate, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. So let us start discussing the questions, Harsha. My first question to you is, of course, about the first generation wealth from IPOs. So the first generation wealth from IPOs, business sales and exits are rising in India. Now, how does this newly created wealth change advisory needs compared to the inherited wealth? And do you think is Gen Z getting more aggressive with returns?
That's a lovely question, Abhishek. I think I would like to take it in a slightly different manner, where I'm saying that what we've observed in our clientele is the old money and the new money, right? The third generation, second generation wealth, they obviously have their own muscle memory. They know how to manage their wealth. It's not something that they've actually got it new, but the newer generation guys who got the money in the first gen, especially through an IPO or through ESOP that they've got in cash, there it's slightly different in terms of how they manage, right? What we need to focus there is what part of which can never go wrong and what part of which they have to make it work harder, right? So that's the difference in which how they approach in the construction of the portfolios, right? That's the difference that we see between the first gen and the old money business. And also on the Gen Z, I hear you. They might not be very, I don't know if we have to call them aggressive, right? Aggressive may be a slightly different, difficult word, but I think they're very thoughtful in their approach, right? What they've seen in the past is obviously they've seen the cryptos doing 10x, just a pitch deck giving you a proper funding for a startup. So they obviously want gratification, but at much faster than what we are kind of used to. So their normal, I think, is not the normal that we are used to. I think that's the difference between Gen Z and us. I might not call them aggressive ultra, but they're very thoughtful. They're very keen on learning, and they obviously need everything much faster.
Interesting answer, Harsha, and very interesting take about the Gen Z's priorities. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. Times have changed, and cross-border deal capability means a lot for Indian investment banking now. Now, what gap does it close, and how does it change conversations with promoters who are eyeing overseas expansion or global capital?
Lovely. So I'll take a step back to probably a decade ago, how we used to interact with the same promoter family to how we now interact with the promoter family. Earlier, let's assume you want to take your company out into global markets. Let's say you want to list yourself in Asia, you want to buy some company out in Europe, right? What we used to do is we usually used to call Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley for doing such transaction, right? So that gap, I think, with the Indian bankers now getting a much bigger forte into the investment banking side of things, that gap is shrinking. Now the same promoter now looks for one individual banker who can solve all their problems. Earlier, they used to call us for wealth. They'll call someone else for doing a trust formation, someone else for handling their insurance portfolios. That gap is kind of shrinking, is what we feel. Earlier, we used to talk to our Indian promoters saying these are the options that are available, right? Now the conversation more revolves around what the peers are doing. How can we be present in the global markets? So that's where I think this whole merger of the whole family wealth and the promoter wealth comes in together. And they kind of tie in together very, very well. And I've seen this change in the last decade in the Indian promoters very well.
Thank you so much, Harsha. Moving on to the next question, you touched upon promoters exploring fundraising. Now, as the promoters explore fundraising, how closely are investment banking conversations converging within one family relationship? Do you think the industry is genuinely shifting from product distribution to fiduciary advice?
Um so are the conversations converging? Definitely yes, right? Are people are more demanding? Definitely true. To be honest, actually, we've seen this whole change come in the last decade or so. Like I was answering in the previous question, where they don't want to speak to five different people to get five different things answered, right? It happens mostly out of the single family office conversations where they have one person who's interacting for all their financial needs, right? So, basis that, the whole conversation is kind of changed, where we are now sitting on the desk, where both the investment banking conversations and the private banking conversation happen in the same room, right? And now it's changed from where we are saying that the anchor is the promoter wealth or the family wealth, right? And then from there, all the other conversations kind of flow down, which is in a way it's a very good thing, and most of the firms are now trying to catch up on this gap that existed in the Indian market space. Coming to your question, where you mentioned on the fiduciary responsibility, is the industry is changing fully? I don't know if everybody is changing, but definitely there is a shift that we have seen. We still exist in a market which is a lot more focused on product, but eventually, I think India should shift over to a full-fledged fiduciary responsibility. And I will keep the client as the most disruptor in this, where if they start asking us the question, saying, how, in terms of product, how does it suit me, then how does it suit you? I think that will kind of disrupt the whole fiduciary responsibility from our side.
Sure, thank you so much. Let us now hear from you about a bit about succession planning. Harsha, succession gets more complex when a family's wealth includes an operating business that could be sold or taken public. Now, how important is aligning succession with capital market strategy, and why do families still delay it?
Beautiful question. Actually, it reflects a lot on the whole how the Indian society is kind of constructed. There are a few questions we still don't like to answer, right? When we're sitting across a dinner table, there are a few questions that we are very uncomfortable answering. One of that is definitely the succession planning that I've seen with all my promoters, right? What happens is there is a fear of how will I take this to my next generation. That was the earlier question. Now there is a optionality that is coming. Right now, the promoter families that we kind of work with have two things to discuss: whether someone in the family wants to take it through, or should we get a strategic investor, a private equity placement, or should I go public and then get a professional to run this space, right? So optionalities have increased, but conversation toughness remains, right? So what we have seen across the promoter families that we kind of work with, the real cost of delay that you mentioned is not the emotional anymore. It's the loss on the whole optionality bit. Because if I choose a certain way to grow, and what if that pathway is wrong and something else should have been a better pathway? That is, I think, is now worrying more to the promoter families.
Thank you so much. So Harsha, looking beyond public equities and structured products, which sectors do you think are seeing the most private market activities right now through pre-IPO rounds, controlled deals, or growth capital? I mean, where should young leaders be building expertise?
As we've been seeing, what's happening in the public markets is mostly the consumer facing and the healthcare sector. When I mean healthcare, it's not just the hospital or the pharma. It's mostly on the diagnostic side. Specialty care is obviously getting a lot of attention in India. All right. And obviously, the green energy is another focus. EV infrastructure building has always been a good investment to do in the last 3 to 4 years. Battery technology is something that we're seeing a lot of capital flows come into in that space, right? In terms of, if you are a young professional and looking to create your own mark, I would suggest use the Indian structural tailwinds rather than focusing just on the industries which have a lot of global tailwinds, right? So basically focusing on anything on the green energy, pharma side, or any consumer-facing technology, where the consumption, Indian consumption growth can be taken care of. I think that's the focus area for most of the businesses.
Really insightful, Harsha. Now, moving on to my next question. Investment banking and wealth management, as you know, have historically operated separately within Indian financial groups. Now, what trends do you see disrupting this separation over the next 5 years?
Again, a beautiful question, Abhishek. See, I'll probably take this answer threefold. First being client himself, right? The how we used to speak to a client 10 years before to now has changed, right? The ultra high net worth individuals are actually asking for better questions. There's a pressure which is coming to us from their point itself, right? So we need to merge the IB and the wealth talks together, right? Second, obviously the technology has been the biggest disruptor. AI has not just hit the IT field, they hit us as well, where we've been able to do all the analytics and analysis that we wanted to do for a portfolio much quicker because of technology, which basically gives us as a banker a lot of time to work with, which I'm assuming that we should use in penetrating deeper into each relationship, right? And third, what is also happening is regulator has been nudging us over and over again towards having a better disclosure and having a better transparency in the way we advise or we have the conversation with the client. Right. So, in my honest view, I think eventually in the next 3 to 5 years, IB and the wealth management will kind of almost come together in the whole conversation that we have with our clients.
Thank you so much, Harsha. So, I will be, going on to the last question of the session. And, before wrapping up the session, I cannot actually hold myself to ask you about the skill sets, because there are a lot of management students, primarily, a lot of management students will be watching this, viewing this interaction. And they would be, as you know, that a lot of MBA finance students want to enter the area of the wealth management, investment banking. So for them, what skills do you think they lack when they enter this area of wealth management or investment banking, and what would make one candidate stand out in the competition?
Lovely. It's a very responsible question, and it takes a lot to answer this, right? I'm never questioning the MBA. I mean, it's fantastic. It gives you a lot of technical knowledge, right? And gives you a lot of technical skills. And the newer kids who are coming into the workforce, they are brilliant any which ways. But what it lacks as an MBA institution that I've seen over the period of my last 2.5 years of working is in most of the MBA classes, they give you a problem which has an active solution, right? But in the real world, we don't have solutions, right? You have to be active and participating at that point of time as to seeing what can be the best solution, right? I think that's something that emotional quotient, which I keep seeing that people usually lack. And in the past 2.5 years of my again working life, what I've seen in the best of the bankers or advisors is the way they hold conversations with the clients, right? That it's not just about how well can you read a balance sheet. It is more on do you know the politics? Can you hold a conversation even on a single malt whiskey, right? About yachts, about travel, right? If people can hold conversations, I think that's the best, situation to be in. So what we look for in the newer generation who is joining us as a workforce is can he hold conversation? How well he knows beyond the scope of just finance and marketing, right? That if someone can actually develop, it's a phenomenal skill to have.
Thank you, Harsha. That was really a very unique and interesting take on this question. Uh, Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this interaction, taking out your time today, and it was lovely meeting you and having you here in this session. We hope this will really go great and it will be loved by the viewers. And we really hope to stay in touch with you and have you again in any of the future sessions by BSmart Business Standard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Really appreciate all the very best. You're doing a phenomenal job.
So that's a wrap on this episode of Manager's Mantra. Thank you, Harsha, for sharing your rich experience and providing career tips to the B Schoolers. B Smart viewers, we hope you found this conversation helpful Share your thoughts with us at bsmart.edit@bsml.in. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for more such insightful and inspiring content. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.